Thanks for staying up later. If I walk out of here tomorrow and they say there's no more show, and in fact, there's no more career, if I've got to go work at a 7-Eleven starting tomorrow, it's okay. Because Audrey Meadows, Alice Cramden, is our guest tonight on Later. And away we go. How'd you get to become Alice?
Oh, what a beautiful introduction. You have to stay on for 100 years because you are the best.
Well, I don't know, but The Honeymooners is my favorite television show of all time. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that. It's not exactly like an esoteric choice. And millions of people can make that same statement.
Yeah.
And the same 39 over and over. I mean, you'd get tired no matter how good a show. You'd get tired of them 3, 4 times. I've seen all of them 15 times. Oh. And I'll go for 16. I'll go for 18. I never tire of them. And other people feel the same way. So it's obviously a classic show.
Yeah. Well, of course, the 39 are the only ones that I had seen until the lost episodes were discovered. But it's funny how I got the job, and I've often thought, what would my career have been if I hadn't been home that afternoon? Because I was in my apartment, and my manager was coming over to see me, and he ran into Gleason's manager on the street, Bullet Sturgum. And I was in a show on Broadway with Phil Silvers. I was in Top Banana. And Bullet said to Val, gee, we've got to think of somebody to play Alice. He's going on the air, his great big contract, and all this publicity was going on. And Val said, well, gee, I'm going to see Audrey. We'll go up and she'll think of people. She'll know somebody to suggest for you. So he rang the doorbell, and instead of just being Val, here comes Bullets along with Val, and they told me the problem. I mentioned every single actress I could think of on Broadway and in California, in Hollywood. Everyone that I mentioned, Bullets would say, we've seen her, or she's not funny. She's a good actress, she's not funny. She's too tall. The other one was too thin. There was something wrong with everybody I mentioned. I said, my gosh, you just have not much more than 2 weeks to make up your mind. I said, you can't be this choosy. And I had seen, Bert Kelton was the originator of it on when Jackie was on Dumont and Cavalcade of Stars, and she was brilliant. And all of a sudden I thought, gosh, Top Banana's going on the road. And I said, oh, you are so stupid. You are so dumb. The most perfect person for the part. There's nobody better. She'd be so marvelous. And I carried on and on. They're saying, who? I said, me. They said, come on, be serious. I said, what do you mean be serious? You have seen every actress that even close to the part. On both coasts, you might as well take me up to see Jackie. So Bullets arranged an interview for me, and I went up to the Old Park Sheraton Hotel, which is where he had his apartment at that time, which later became offices. And Life magazine was doing a huge, big layout on Jackie. And so he excused himself from the photographing and all, and just talked to me for a few minutes. I had seen him around town. I did not know the man particularly. But he asked the 2 men to stay, so I waited out in the hall. And as soon as I left, he turned to the 2 of them and he said, why don't you guys take the needles out of your head? She's all wrong. She's too young and she's too pretty. So Val came out, and we said goodbye to Bullets, and he told me this. We went down in the elevator, and I was not really serious about the part until I heard what he said. And I was really very disappointed in him. I would have accepted it from a producer, maybe, but with a man of his talent, I thought, he must know I can play that part. So we walked down the street, and I said, Val, they're going to have to make up their minds very soon. And can you get a photographer to come to my apartment tomorrow morning, and I'm not going to get out of bed till you ring the bell. And we'll have pictures taken if the guy can develop them and print them and get them up there the same afternoon. So he got hold of a photographer. I went home and I got an old blouse and I tore the sleeve out, and I thought, what'll I do with my hair, you know? So I got fiddling around in the bathroom. I had combs and I pulled it back and pulled little streamers down, and got an old apron and an old, terrible looking outfit. And they rang the bell the next morning. I got up, no makeup on, and fixed my hair with the combs and posed with frying pans and coffee pots and stuff. And we got the pictures developed by 4 in the afternoon. And we asked Bullets to take them in with no name. So Bullets went in with the black and white photos and showed them to Jackie. He said, what do you think of this actress? And Jackie looked at the pictures. He said, my God, he said, it's Alice. Who is she? Where is she? Can we get her? And Bullets said, well, that's the girl who was in here yesterday to see you. And Jackie said, any dame with a sense of humor like that deserves the job. Hire her. And I was hired. I never had to read for the part. As a matter of fact, I never got a chance to go over the part with him until the Saturday night that was his first show on CBS.
Because he hated to rehearse.
Which I didn't know. So Monday I was called for rehearsal, and I went up there and met Art, and the secretary, wonderful girl who was really assistant to Jackie, Lee Reynolds. I don't know if any of your people knew her. She said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." She said, "Nobody called you. Oh, isn't this terrible?" Jackie had an appointment. He had to leave. So would you come back tomorrow at the same time? So Tuesday, went up there. It was about 11 o'clock, and chatted with Art again. And again, they didn't know how to apologize enough. Jackie wasn't there. But would I come the next day? I said, "I can't. I have a matinee." "Well, then Thursday." Well, I was getting so psychopathic with nerves and fright,
Saturday is the first show.
Yeah. And now it's Thursday. It's going to be my first meeting with going over the script. We did meet one day and had pictures taken. And I thought that day we would certainly go over the script. Nothing. Friday, went up there 11 o'clock, and no Jackie. But there was Art. And Art is one of the dearest, sweetest human beings in this world. Doesn't have a mean hair in his head. And Jackie had gotten, in those days, the ultimate in TV sets with those great, big, bulky cabinets. They were huge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, set was in the middle, but you had all this wood around it.
Yep.
He was so proud of it and so happy with that. And we sat there. We didn't even turn it on. And I said, "Art, I know where he is," because I'd gotten myself so worked up. I was just frantic. And Art said, "Where?" I said, "He's at Toots Shor's celebrating his big contract. It's the biggest contract ever made to this day." And
Toots Shor is a legendary New York saloon keeper, knew all the entertainers and all
everybody.
the sports figures, and
Right.
they could all be found in his establishment.
Exactly. So I said, "And I know what table he's going to be at." I said, "You walk in." I said, "We'll go for lunch." And I said, "We can't go there for lunch." I said, "There's no law against it. We can go to any restaurant we want for lunch, and we will go to Toots Shor." And he didn't want to go. And I kept after poor Art, and I said, "Now, you go on one condition. You walk in the front door and you walk past the bar. Don't look at anybody. And don't look to your left, because that's the #1 table, and that's where Jackie will be celebrating." So Art finally agreed to go, and we went. We didn't look to the left, and we went and we sat down, and as soon as we got main news, Jack Hurdle, two of Jackie's producers with him, Jack Philbin and Jack Hurdle. Jack Hurdle jumped up and came over to apologize. "Oh," I said, "you don't have to apologize to us." I said, "We didn't mind at all, really, but the least you could have done was have the television set working." And he said, "It wasn't working?" I said, "No, I don't know what was wrong with it." I said, "Art did get a screwdriver, and he tried to take the back off, but nothing. We just kind of left it."
So Jackie's got the rabbit ears while this is happening.
Yeah. Now, Hurdle was so nervous, he ran to the phone booth to call the repairman to come up to the apartment and fix it. He got a big bill for fixing a set that was in perfect condition. And then they thanked me very much on Saturday when I got in the theater. And Saturday was the most difficult day of my life. Unbelievable.
No rehearsal at this point.
Hadn't read the script with the man. Now you can imagine, everybody had worked together. So my call was either 1 or 2 o'clock, I've forgotten. And you walked in the old Studio 50, you know, on 53rd Street, and sat in the audience. And they rehearsed the June Taylor Dancers. Eileen Barton was our guest singer. And he rehearsed her, rehearsed the other sketches, and all of a sudden said, "Now the Honeymooners." So the curtains opened, they had the setup, and we got up in our own clothes. And we went through it once and went back and sat down in the theater. And time was going by. He rehearsed other stuff, and on and on and on, and I kept looking at the clock thinking, God, when am I going to get a chance to do this in costume? So I turned to Art Carney and I said, when do we, get up there again? When do we block this again? And he said, "You just did it." I said, when do we have another run through? I'm getting nervous thinking about it all these years later. And he said, "You just did it." I said, "Well, what time is dress rehearsal?" He said, "You just did it." I just looked straight ahead, and I've always had this kind of blank expression, hiding all the emotions inside. I looked straight ahead, and the tears just started streaming down my face. And my manager saying, don't cry, don't cry. Oh, my God, your eyes will swell up. They'll be all red, and they'll be small, and they're small enough now. So at 6 o'clock, I went up to my dressing room, and I learned all his lines and all Art's lines. And fortunately, it did go well. But as soon as that sketch was over, I didn't wait for the show to be over. I jumped in a cab and went home and crying all the way. I don't know what the cab driver thought. Just another nutty New Yorker. I cried all the way so loud in this cab, all alone in the back seat.
Gleason was master of all he surveyed, and by acclamation, one of the greatest talents in the history of show business, and he knew it. So very few people challenged him. But you were a gutsy enough young woman to do that first time out of the box, because you had become so exasperated with his not rehearsing and causing you so much anxiety that you decided to stick the needle in him a little bit, huh?
Oh, you know that story? Oh, I'm so ashamed of that. I really am ashamed of what I did. Naturally, you're called to go down on the stage and be ready to go on, and it was the first time I'd seen him in the bus driver's uniform, and he walked up, and he was so excited and so up for the show. And he said, well, good luck, Miss Meadows. And I said, thank you very much, Mr. Gleason. Good luck to you. And I was so frantic inside. I was just like a wild woman. And I said, I just want to tell you, I think you are the greatest talent that not only that I've ever worked with, but that I have ever seen. And I said, your voice is so magnificent. I think I shall just go out on the stage and listen to it. Now, he's smiling as I'm, flattering him, until he got it. And he said, you mean you're going to throw me some bum lines? I said, oh, no, Mr. Gleason. I'm not going to throw you any lines because you don't need anyone. And with that, I could hear the announcer, Jack Lasculi, doing the announcement, and curtains opened, and we were on. And as luck would have it, Jackie had the first line. So I just waited that one beat. I thought, you have terrorized me this whole week. I have never been treated so terribly in my entire life. And you've terrorized me, so I'm going to terrorize you. And I waited that one beat, and the concentration of his eyes on mine was, is this peculiar actress going to say her line or not? And that was that. But I'm ashamed of doing that now. I really am.
Was his lifestyle and his appetite for food and drink as legendary as
yes,
as big as the legend has it?
Absolutely, bigger than life. Everything about Jack. He was the most immaculately dressed human being, no matter what size he was, because his weight went up and down.
The last conversation you ever had with him, I understand, was really poignant.
Oh, of course, I loved him so. I love Art too. But there was something about Jack that just took your heart, And his, the quickness with which the illness took him was to me, so a blessing for him, but sad for Marilyn and the rest of the people who loved him. And I had been talking to June Taylor and Marilyn, because I had lost my husband, then June lost hers shortly after, and then Jackie went. And I was waiting for a time when Jackie would be alert enough and well enough to talk to him on the phone. So Marilyn and I had it planned and put the call through, and she took the phone in the closet. And she said, Audrey, now don't feel badly, because he doesn't speak very clearly now. He kind of mumbles, and we have a hard time figuring out what he means. And I said, I know, Marilyn, I understand. So I could hear her as she took the phone from the closet over to the bed, and she said, Jackie, it's Audrey, it's Alice, it's your Alice. And he picked up the phone, and I said, hello, Jack. And the first sentence I didn't understand at all. And I said, Jackie, it just occurred to me, I said, I was just thinking, after all these years, I never really thanked you for giving me the part of Alice. And as clear as a bell, his voice came through and he said, I knew what I was doing. I always knew what I was doing, with that wonderful reading that he had. And then we spoke just for shortly a few more minutes. And then Marilyn took the phone back, and in talking to me, she said to him, well, that's great. You mumble when you talk to us, but you can speak clearly when you talk to Audrey. It was the actor.
They asked you, shortly after he died, to do a eulogy for him on the Emmy show, and they wanted you to do it in the Honeymooners' kitchen as Alice. But you wouldn't.
No. They wanted me to come on as Alice as if Ralph had died. I said, Ralph didn't die. Jackie died. Ralph is living on forever. Everything that Jackie created that's on film will live forever. And I thought it was total insanity. And I had quite a difficult time convincing them that I would be perfectly happy to walk back into the set dressed as myself, Audrey, not Alice, and do a real caring eulogy for the man that we all admired and respected so much.
But Alice and Ralph are there in Brooklyn in 1955, and that's where they'll always be.
And that's where they'll always be, yeah.
This is the first of two shows with Audrey Meadows, and in the second one we're going to talk about some of her favorite episodes of The Honeymooners and mine, and we'll try and work in some clips and whatnot. In the time that's remaining here, though, there's an interesting story about Jackie and Elvis. People might not know that Elvis made his network television debut with
very
Jackie.
First appearance with Jackie. And he was very young, and Colonel Parker, wasn't that his name? Yeah, was with him. And it seems to me he was in that white suit. I wonder how many times he sent that to the cleaners. He was immaculate, that Colonel Parker. And Elvis went through his number, and they had a little discussion, because in those days, you couldn't show all that wiggling and, you know, jumping around that we can do today. And so they had to shoot him higher up and miss part of the guitar. And so they wanted to do it again. And Elvis didn't want to do it again. And he just wasn't going to. It was like a spoiled child. I mean, the behavior was sweetly spoiled. I mean, he wasn't throwing a fit or anything. He just was, I want to do it. And Jack and everybody's looking, what are we going to do? We've got to stage this guy. He wasn't going to stage us. He was going to spend all day with Elvis. So Colonel Parker was standing right near where I was sitting in the audience. And he said, come on now, Elvis. He said, you do it again. And he patted his his pocket here. And he said, I have something for you I'm going to give you if you do it again. What is in his pocket? So Elvis very merrily went off and did it again, and they got the shots that they wanted and got it all set up. And I just tailed Colonel Parker to see what he was going to give him. What do you suppose he had in his pocket? A candy bar.
It's the biggest star in the world at that time, and he was enticed by a candy bar.
A candy bar.
In a way, it's kind of a funny story, but also sort of chilling, because you can see this sort of mentality and the dog and the leash and the whole thing.
Yeah. And also, I guess the sweets led him to all kinds of the weight gain that he went into.
Next time with Audrey Meadows, all of our favorite Honeymooner episodes. We'll talk about Bert Wiedemeyer. We'll talk about the chef of the future, Mrs. Manicotti. They'll all be here, and we hope you will, too. See you later. Thanks for staying up later. In part one of our get-together with Audrey Meadows, Alice Cramden, of course, from The Honeymooners, we talked about how she first got the role and about some insights concerning Jackie Gleason and how the show was put together. And now we move on to specific episodes and specific things about The Honeymooners. You know, did women ever say to you, I objected to Jackie, to Ralph Cramden, saying, bang, zoom, and one of these days, Alice, a sort of threat of violence?
No, but I did get letters from an awful lot of women saying that they were the same, their husband was a bus driver, same economic level, and that they dressed better than I did. And in those days, the fan mail was hysterical. I wish I'd lived in the days of Diamond Jim Brady and gotten something decent. I got pot holders, and curtains were sent to me all the time, and some lady enclosed a dime with the curtains, and that was for me to go to the 5 and 10 and buy the curtain rod because it was too tough for her to wrap it. Aprons by the ton came
But,
in.
you know, they had a point, because Ralph drove a bus, Norton worked in the sewer.
Right.
And Norton and Trixie's apartment was a whole lot better than yours. They had a TV set, they had a phone, they had drapes.
Yes, they did, but they didn't have all the crazy schemes that Jack got into and blew our money on.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't even have a phone until I got a job.
And then you would come up with some scheme of your own. For example, wasn't the guy from the department store, Carlos from the department store?
Oh, yes. We're going to redecorate the apartment.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
He was going to come in and redecorate the whole place, but Ralph was convinced he was a gigolo.
That's right, exactly.
Hit out on the fire escape to catch him. Aha!
You know, there was never any glass in that window,
Thank
naturally.
heavens.
And there was one time that it never occurred to me that there was a lock on that door, because stage doors on sets don't have them. And Jackie made an exit, and I heard a funny click. I thought, that couldn't be a lock. And then I heard whispering, very strange whispering outside, and there was no one for me to talk to. And I couldn't leave the stage. I couldn't walk off into the bedroom and leave an empty set. So I think I went over to the stove and started to stir nothing in a pan and hum, and all this whispering, and my back was to the window. And all of a sudden, I heard a voice, and I looked around, and Jackie had sent Art around, who was to make his next entrance, and to the fire escape, and he came through the window without opening it. And as he came through, he said, "There's more than one way to skin a cat." And then the next one on was a little a Western Union guy. And as I went this time, the Western Union kid knocks on the door. And as I started, I thought, is that door going to open or not? And just as I started for the door, Artie said, "Good luck, Alice."
That window was the site of many a memorable moment.
Oh, yes.
On the Honeymooners.
Yeah.
Like when Ralph tried to pass the cue on to Norton, who was going to go into his sleepwalking routine.
Yeah.
And he would come sleepwalking down when Ralph said, "It certainly looks like rain tonight." And it was, whoa! It certainly looks like, about 5 times. It was an amazing apartment, though.
You do that very well, you know.
I'm not the right proportion, though.
No.
An amazing apartment in that when one or the other of you went into the bedroom,
Yes.
didn't make any difference how loudly anyone spoke in the other room. You couldn't hear a thing.
Couldn't hear a
Those
thing,
walls
no.
must have been made of granite.
That's right. I love that apartment.
Do you have a favorite episode?
I have 2 favorite episodes. One is the adoption story where we adopted the baby. And unbeknownst to us, we ran over time. And we finished it for the studio audience, but it wasn't finished for the public. And the phones were tied up at CBS for several days with people calling up saying they do not have to give that baby back. That mother has no right to take the baby back. They can keep the baby. And a friend of mine's mother called me up, who works in, did at the time, worked in one of those groups, you know, for unwed mothers. And she said, "Audrey, you do not have to give that baby back." I said, "Mrs. Douglas, it's a story. It's a play. I don't have the baby." She said, "Oh, my God." She said, everyone took it so seriously. It was the most beautiful written story, I think, of all time.
The Honeymooners could be genuinely touching.
Oh, yes.
Whenever I see the Christmas episode and Ralph has misbehaved again and he's been inconsiderate again, although he loves Alice as much as any man can love any woman, but his desire to be a hero and to be a bigger man than he's capable of being sometimes gets the better of him. And then in that moment of reconciliation, she reaches behind her back and she's got that present. And she says, "Merry Christmas, Ralph." And he gives her the baby, "You're the greatest." I mean, that's as touching a love scene as you will ever see. Carney and Gleason were such extraordinary physical comedians that you made a very astute decision early on about how you would play Alice.
Well, I really had no choice. Fortunately, having seen him do it on the Cavalcade of Stars, I realized they were both so physical that if I was physical, too, it would be a little much, you know. And I thought, well, I will just hold my position. I will stay firm in what I say with the various approaches to him, and he'll have to come back to me, because the director that we had followed the money. And wherever Jackie went, that camera went with Jackie. So if you just stood there, he would eventually come back to you. And if he ever couldn't remember his lines, he paced. And he walked up and down. And he'd pace, you know, behind the table and around.
And you would just stand there with your hands on your hips and look at him. And now that I think of it, you seldom, if ever, walked into a frame.
No.
You were
I
just
was found.
there. and you were the calm in this violent sea.
Yes, yeah.
When Ralph Cramden would give Alice one of those big kisses, just after exclaiming, "Baby, you're the greatest," he never really kissed her, did he?
No.
Stage kisses.
Stage kisses.
Off to the side?
Well, off to the side, maybe caught the corner of my mouth, but it wasn't what we see today with exchanging.
Well, he would envelop her so much that you could hardly. It was like a Rudolph Valentino swayback job.
And it was a lovely hug, and it looked as though we were really kissing.
Yeah.
But in those days, you didn't do that kind of open mouth kissing, that sharing tongues that we do today.
You know, Ralph was obviously insanely jealous, whether it was the guy coming to redecorate or the Mamba teacher, which ended up in one of the greatest scenes in the world when he finally realizes that all intentions are innocent, and he and Mrs. Manicotti and Norton are all dancing around. That's unbelievable.
I know.
But there was the one time when he made you jealous, when you were invited over to Bert Wiedemeyer's house, and he had the bimbo for the wife.
Oh, yes.
And they were fawning all over her.
All over her, ignoring us, letting us just sit. The wonderful thing about those scripts is that the situations touched everybody. Everyone can believe or has experienced in their life some of the things that we went through, don't you think?
Sure. And so they're you know, making a big deal over this flashy wife that Bert Wiedemeyer has, which was funny in and of itself, because Bert Wiedemeyer was this kind of wimpy little character, and he had this statuesque blonde bombshell for a wife. Then the next night, Ralph comes back from driving the bus, and you greet him dressed like a floozy. And I thought that was one of your greatest ever.
Well, I think Alice was really the first women's liver.
How so?
Because she didn't just lie down and take it like, you know, be walked over like a doormat. She stood up for herself. She stood up for what she felt was right. And in telling him off, there was always that little kind of glint of enjoyment when she got even with him. But at the same time, as you say, there was that depth of her understanding of the man, and that the love was more important than worrying about the fact that he blew the money again.
Yeah, she'd nail him with some of the most biting sarcasm.
Yeah.
After he'd go through some elaborate things, she'd just close the conversation with one quick dagger. But in the end, she was his sanctuary for all of his flaws and all of his shortcomings. She justified his existence. If this wonderful woman loved him, then there must be something redeemable about him.
But also, she didn't get into a fight that was a long fight. Don't you remember? Alice would always finally kind of give up and sit in the chair and know that he would have to come around to the realization of the apology.
Yeah.
I loved that moment of just sitting there and not having to do anything except... And you know, I never knew what he was doing behind me until we did the filming.
Until you heard the audience react.
That audience would be screaming with laughter when he would, you know, try and...
He tried to gather himself. I can't remember which episode it was, but he had hurt your feelings, and you had told him so. And then you sat down at the kitchen table very forlornly, and then he walked behind you and gave it that...
Yes.
He's going to start to say something, but he couldn't quite.
Couldn't quite do it. And the audience would scream with laughter. I had no idea what he was doing back there.
Did you get residuals from the honeymooners?
Yes.
Did all of the performers?
Yes. No. You see, my brothers, both lawyers, and one was in New York, and then my theatrical lawyer is here in New York, and who's also the lawyer for the union, for AFTRA. And they handled the contract. And I begged Art to get a lawyer. And Art, it didn't concern him that much. None of us knew that it would run all this time. And I said, Art, you're paid more than I am. You're billed ahead of me. You've got to help me. You're standing in my way. So we were halfway through shooting the 39 before I signed my contract. But by just waiting and holding out, I would dream up things, and I'd call my brother at night, and I'd say, I just thought of something I want in the contract. He'd say, you can't put anything in there now. I say, I certainly can. Why can't I? He said, you can't. It's set. Well, I'm going to, I would say. And he said, on what basis? I'd say, girls' rules. I lived by girls' rules, and I wanted in there. So we would go to Jackie, and sure enough, we'd get my little thing that was girls' rules. There were so many riders in that contract, initialed, and there was one they changed, which I thought was very insulting to Jackie. They changed the morals clause. Went on forever. That was the, I guess the mentality of the corporate structure at Buick, that their lawyers probably didn't trust anybody in show business. And it went on for so long, I felt it was very insulting because all the contracts had to match. I said, well, I'm not going to sign anything like that, for heaven's sakes. It was disgraceful. And they said, well, you have to. I said, okay, then I'm putting my own rider in here. And I put in a rider that said, and I drew it with a heart, and I put, J.G. loves A.M., and made Jackie and everybody initial it, just because I was so aggravated about the morals clause.
So the morals clause, as it pertained, it was written specifically for Jackie, to, I guess, to take care of his behavior.
I guess for all of us, but his being the star and everything riding on him, it was very insulting. You know, there's a standard morals clause and everything. But I mean, this one got into specifics. Somebody did something with a goat in the middle of Fifth Avenue, practically. I mean, it was just, it was absurd. And I would have none of it. It didn't fit my girls' rules.
The lost episodes were a disappointment to all of us who cared about the Honeymooners, because even though it was always bang, zoom, and one of these days, Alice, the love and the mutual dependence between these two people was evident every millisecond of those 39 episodes. But in the lost episodes, there's a harshness, and they're yelling at each other in a shrill way, and it's confrontational, and there is that underlying feeling of love and affection, and the basic decency of the people is not there. It looks dark and sinister. Throw them out.
Well, because that was those sketches ran about 12 or 14 minutes. And sketch comedy is totally different. It's a totally different style of performing from situation comedy, or from the reality, the truth of the characters. And to me, the great joy was that we just developed into real caring people, where you knew that no matter what cracks we made at each other, there was a depth of understanding and a depth of love.
Well, let's just get this down off the wall here and have the honors done by Audrey Meadows. I'm looking at this. This might very well be the moment at which he has assured you that he's the coolest man on earth. And you say, that's right, Ralph, I forgot. You're the man who bribes the dust. Would you autograph that for us, please?
Very happy to. Just so happens I have a pen.
What a coincidence. That was one of my favorite episodes, too, that $64,000 question, and he memorized every song in history.
That wasn't that fabulous.
Till the last question.
Brilliant, yeah.
Who wrote Swanee River? Hamina, hamina, hamina. Ed Norton?
Yeah. It was great.
This was a great pleasure for us. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Audrey Meadows. We'll see you later.